Dialogue.
I've made many mistakes in my life, but that wasn't one of them.
Oh, but it was.
It's just characters talking.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win, or you die.
And when it happens in our favorite films and TV shows, we're given all the visual information we need to know who's speaking.
Gee, after all that, I was kind of hoping somebody would make a speech.
And from where.
Bruce Wayne at a charity ball.
But those movies and series we love start as nothing more than words in a screenplay. So as screenwriters, we need a quick and efficient way to deliver that same information without breaking the flow of our stories. And that is where character headings come in. Every paragraph of dialogue your characters utter requires a character heading that tells us exactly who's speaking. Eduardo.
She said, Facebook me, and we can all go for a drink later, which is stunningly great for two reasons. One, she said, Facebook me, right? And then the other is,
Mark.
I want to have drinks later.
Eduardo.
Have you ever heard so many different good things packed into one regular-sized sentence?
As a reminder from the last video, character headings, also known as character cues, character captions, or character slugs, are written in all caps, on their own line double-spaced after the previous element, with a left margin of about 3.75 inches. The name in the character heading should be clearly derived from the character's introduction, but there's no need to use the exact name here. You might introduce a character with their full name, but choose to only use their first name for their character headings. Finally, we land on ex-model, magazine editor, and fashion designer Birdie J, 40s. She looks both fabulous and sick of life. Birdie.
So bored.
Or introduce a group of characters, but add a number or descriptor to the character's headings to differentiate them. A uniformed cop escorts Jones and his aunt out the front door. Several reporters are waiting. Reporter 1. Reporter 2. Whatever name you use in the character heading, just be sure to keep it consistent throughout the script. For a reader, changing character headings is one of the most confusing and frustrating formatting errors a writer can make. But as with almost all things screenwriting, you can do it if you can do it well. If your story is better told with a name change, just be sure to make it totally clear in the description. Tara appears from the living room in her manly dirtbag regalia and glasses, sneering at Marshall and Max with a cigarette in her mouth. She's become Buck, her troubled, contentious, shit-kicking macho male alter ego. Buck.
Right again, Peach Fuzz.
It's usually good practice to also write the new name with the old one separated by a slash or in parentheses, but only for that first instance where the name changes. But that's not the only thing heading parentheticals are used for. If the dialogue we hear is from a character that's physically present, but just not visible in the actual shot, include the abbreviation OS to indicate they're off-screen. Dad, off-screen. Fleabag.
Thanks!
OC, meaning off-camera, is also acceptable, but less common these days. If the dialogue we hear wouldn't be performed on set and would instead have to be added over a scene in post, use VO for voiceover instead. Ki-young, voiceover.
생긴 건 둥글둥글한데 그년이 속은 아주 둥그랭이야.
This could be as simple as dialogue from one scene played over visuals from another, or could be something like a reporter on a TV. CNN reporter, voiceover.
And at around 8 hours after landing, there's still no signs of what might be called first contact.
Though on TV is sometimes used instead. While the sound might appear to be coming out of the TV in the final edit, the speaking character isn't physically present in the room, so the audio wouldn't be captured on set. It'll be a voiceover added over the scene in post. The same would go for a phone call where we can hear but can't see one of the characters. Man, voiceover.
I'm sorry, I guess I dialed the wrong number.
Though, again, you'll sometimes see on phone or something similar used instead. A video call like Skype or FaceTime would also include VO from the character on the device screen. Professor, voiceover.
Okay, sounds like you do need my help.
But again, you might see something like Skype, FaceTime, or video call here instead. Voices in a character's head would also be VO. JD, voiceover.
The worst part was knowing right then that I could never forgive her.
She kisses him gently on the cheek. JD, voiceover.
I forgive her.
As would any narration. John McEnroe, voiceover.
Now you may be asking yourself, why is sports icon John McEnroe narrating this tale?
Though, if you're using narrator as the character's heading, adding VO becomes redundant. Narrator.
But Dick Cheney saw something else that no one else did. He saw an opportunity.
You sometimes see voice used in this same way, where the VO is implicit. Voice.
Isn't it funny? You hear a phone ring and it could be anybody. But a ringing phone has to be answered, doesn't it?
Some writers even tack voice onto the end of a character name to indicate a voiceover. Moss's voice.
Is Carson Wells there?
But that makes things harder on production since the actual name of the character is inconsistent, which is why sticking to a heading parenthetical is almost always your best bet. If the dialogue from the next scene begins before we cut to it, this would also be VO, but we sometimes give it a more specific name, prelap. Cop, prelap.
Hold on, so you don't know CPR?
Jeevan, prelap.
No.
Cop, prelap.
But you ran that stage anyway.
Jeevan. Yeah. Think pre as in previous and lap as in overlap. The dialogue overlaps the previous scene. OS and VO are possibly the most confused terms in screenwriting. But all you have to remember is that if the character speaking could be in the same location, but just isn't captured in frame, it's OS.
Howard! What's going on? Are you boys roughhousing?
Every other bit of dialogue that isn't coming from a character on screen is VO in one form or another. You might remember from my page layout video that we sometimes include the abbreviation for continued in our character headings when the dialogue is broken by a page break or description without another character speaking in between. Marty.
Husbands and fathers
Marty
and mothers and wives.
Marty continued.
They take new jobs, they relocate with their families all the time. You know, this country was built by Americans pursuing opportunity. Okay, the pioneers for one.
As a reminder, this is only mandatory for page breaks, but it's still very common to see when description breaks dialogue since many screenwriting programs default to it. With all these possibilities for your heading parentheticals, you may end up with multiple pieces of information like continued and VO. Galadriel, voiceover.
It began with the forging of the great rings.
Galadriel, voiceover continued.
3 were given to the elves, immortal, wisest, and fairest of all beings.
You'll want to separate them with a semicolon, or use multiple parentheticals. But character heading parentheticals aren't the only use you find for parentheses in dialogue, which is why you should check out this video to master parenthetical directions to keep your dialogue crystal clear and control your pacing.